Since 2018, more than 90,000 people have died because of firearms in the United States. And just 122 days into 2023, the country already has seen 185 mass shootings. Fred Guttenberg joins us now, along with international gun policy consultant Tom Gabor. They are co-authors of the new book titled American Carnage, Shattering the Myths That Fuel Gun Violence. Guys, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Fred, it's been 5 years since you lost Jaime at Parkland. Just had the 5-year commemoration a couple of months ago. And it seems like every day we get another one of these stories. And I watched you watching that woman absorb what had happened in her community as it hits another community that has to now live with something that you live with painfully every day. It's an epidemic.
Well, it is. And it's kind of hard to transition, but I do want to just say one thing to the two of you, because I do know it's your birthday today. And if there's one thing I've learned in 5 years, it is to celebrate moments like that. So happy birthday to you. And I know it's your birthday tomorrow.
Thank you, Fred.
And so happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Listen,
so
it
much.
is an epidemic. And before we went on, I was talking to you about the book, because it's the reason we wrote it. You know, Tom came to me 2 years ago and said, I've got a project that I'm working on. I want to take on the lies of this lobby, because ultimately that's why we are where we are today. You know, I look at everything in the context of Jaime's life, and my daughter, she would be 20 this July. She would be 20. She would be having the greatest time in her life, but she's not. This weekend I visited her at a cemetery. And the reason, if you go back to 2003, Jaime, at that time, she was just born, a beautiful baby girl to us, but there were 200 million weapons in America. 20 years later, there's over 400 million. If you go back to 2003, AR-15 sales, less than 2% of all weapons sold, now 25%. Wow. I just told you everything you need to know to understand why we are where we are today. And when I listen to Abbott and the other really insane liars in the GOP try to make this about immigration status, they are part of why we are where we are today. You know the one question he never asked? He never asked, how did the guy get the AR-15? Because that's the only question that matters. It's the only question. And part of the answer is the policies in Texas allowed it to happen.
So let's talk about this book, Tom, American Carnage, Shattering the Myths That Fuel Gun Violence. If you had to point to one out of the gate, what is the biggest myth that you lay out in this book?
Well, the gun lobby and gun extremists have been promoting the notion that an armed citizenry, if we can get Americans armed, it's going to be a safer society. If we get more people carrying guns as well as having guns in their home, we'll be a safer society. And in fact, we're in a situation now where gun carrying has increased fivefold. People who carry a gun every day. 40% of gun owners now keep a gun loaded and accessible in the home. So now we see the result. Rather than being safer, we're seeing almost 50,000 gun deaths in the country each year. We're seeing a doubling, as you mentioned, Willie, a doubling of mass shootings over the last 10 years. We're seeing half of Americans now who've personally been impacted by gun violence, either been threatened with a gun, shot, had a family member shot, or witnessed a shooting. So it's really coming home to us that by no means it's having a very adverse effect, this narrative that the gun lobby's created, because in fact things are a whole lot worse.
And how many times have we heard it, a politician, many of them predictable, if there's a school shooting, said if only the teachers had guns, that wouldn't have happened.
Can I put an end to that? Can I put an end to that right now? And again, those are the liars telling the lies designed to do one thing, be a part of selling more guns. If I can ask everybody listening to the show to do me one favor, focus on motivation. Because there's the motivation of people like us who simply want to stop the next one, and then there's the motivation of those who are part of that lobby who simply want to sell the next one. Don't listen to them. There's about 115,000 schools in America. Okay, it's a lot of schools. Since Columbine, there have been fewer than 400 school shootings. My daughter got caught up in something that is really rare. So the idea that simply selling a whole lot of additional guns to armed teachers is the solution to that is simply insanity. But you know what will happen if they get their way? You'll have more gun violence in schools. You'll have emotional people carrying guns in schools who will react wrong, who may leave them out on a bathroom counter, which has already happened in schools where guns are allowed by armed teachers. It is a deadly, deadly idea to say arming teachers is a solution to this. We need to deal with the reality that you can't ring a doorbell by accident, pull in a driveway by accident, because we listened to these liars for too many years, and in 20 years, we've doubled the number of guns in America. That's why we are where we are today.
So, after Uvalde and after Nashville, we're hearing from parents and, questions about the police response, the police being outgunned, not fast enough, whatever the issues were, depending on the mass shooting. There are so many, it's hard to keep track of them. It's literally the issue at this point. But we've heard from parents saying, well, we think we need to arm because we don't know if the police I could get there quicker. I mean, this mindset, which is another one of the myths that you all talk about, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
Can I tell you where that line started?
Yeah.
That line started as Wayne LaPierre's response to the Sandy Hook shooting. I think 4 or 5 days after Sandy Hook was the very first time he said it. That was his response. Just never forget, they turned Sandy Hook into a gun sales bonanza. Oof. We've listened to the liars, and this isn't for a long time. Listen, the NRA shifted course in the 80s, but this country, the majority of our history is as a gun safety country, passing gun safety laws that started to shift in the late 70s when the NRA changed. We started to see the big push through the 80s and the 90s, and the real success of their effort in the early 2000s would Stand Your Ground, okay? They have been pushing us on this course that has led us to where we are today. And what Tom and I really hope to do with this book is arm people with the information to no longer have to listen to the liars, to say, not this time, and to vote with knowledge for someone who wants to reduce gun violence.
So, Tom, Fred just mentioned the Stand Your Ground laws, and certainly we've had a rash of these shootings in recent weeks where someone inadvertently goes to a house and gets shot or pulls into the driveway. Dispel some of the myths about that legislation.
Okay, well, Stand Your Ground now has been applied in about 30 states. And traditional self-defense really refers to, or concepts of self-defense refers to an individual who's being attacked. And traditionally in English and American law, a person had a duty to retreat or find a way to de-escalate a conflict. And it was a last resort to use lethal force. Now an individual has a reasonable belief that reasonable belief that they're going to be seriously harmed might be a mistaken belief, such as the gentleman, the 85-year-old who in Kansas City shot through the window and shot the young man. He may have had a reasonable belief in his view that this young man was about to break in, but factually would have been very incorrect. And but the other aspect of Stand Your Ground, and it's been very toxic in Florida, where it was introduced, where we saw 4,400 additional homicides in the first 10 years of that law, is that there is no duty to retreat. So if you have that reasonable belief that somebody's about to attack you and cause you serious harm, you can immediately move to lethal force. You have no obligation to retreat, to de-escalate, to leave the situation. So it's basically also called, by those who share our beliefs, a shoot first law.
Finally, I'd like to hear, Fred, you on this, which is there's been some sort of fatalism among some politicians after the Nashville school shooting. One infamous comment from a Republican, a Tennessee Republican member of Congress said, we're not going to do anything about it. We can't do anything here. Just forget about it. There is a throw up your hands. There's you could ban every gun today in this country and there'd still be those 400 guns floating around. Criminals are going to do bad things. There's nothing we can do about it. What's your answer to that?
absolutely just another dishonest lie. There is so much we can do to reduce gun violence. Listen, after Parkland, and you all remember this, we passed gun safety. And I'll give you an example of two things we did. Red flag laws, and we raised the age of 21. Those red flag laws have been used over 7,000 times in Florida. They have stopped gun violence. So I say to any legislator who speaks that way, you're just one of the people who I really want to help fire. My hope, my inspiration, what keeps me moving every single day is my belief in the American voter. And I'll just say to every American voter listening to this right now, vote in 2024. I don't care if you think it's a perfect candidate. I don't care if you love the candidate. But if it's a candidate who says they have a plan to be a part of reducing gun violence, who's going to be a part of a woman's right to choose, who's going to be a part of defending freedom and democracy, vote. Because what the morons like Abbott understand is that only a minority of people vote. And they typically only focus on their base for that reason. Guess what? In 24, we are going to show up. America gets it. America doesn't want to have to live in fear anymore, and we're going to vote because of it.
Well, Fred and Tom, everything we've been talking about, what you guys have been talking about, if you look at this number, people agree. I mean, these are issues that the American people want change on. They just have to get out and vote.
Mika, solving gun violence is more popular than apple pie. I mean, that's what those numbers tell you.
It's coming to a doorstep near them. The people feel it.
And the elected people better respond.
The new book is entitled American Carnage, Shattering the Myths That Fuel Gun Violence. Fred Guttenberg and Tom Gabor, thank you both very much for
Thank you
coming
all
on.
so much.
Really appreciate it, and it's good to see you both.
Thank you.